Hello and welcome to Mishak Milim, which is Hebrew for Game of Words or Word Game. My name is Shachar and I'm the co-creator of this podcast along with my brother Zohar. Usually this podcast is in Hebrew, but we've been planning for a while now to have episodes in English, so you just happen to be stumbling on the first episode in English, and we are really excited about this one. It's an episode that we've been working hard to get well before the November election in the U.S. because we feel like this topic is very important for those elections. The topic today is presented by our guest, Dr. Robert Epstein, who's a senior research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology. He's the former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today magazine and also an author of 15 books on various topics. He's also the director emeritus of the Cambridge Center for Behavioral Studies. So academic with a lot of accolades and credentials. Dr. Epstein has been researching in the past few years the tremendous and unexpected or overwhelming effects of big technology companies on ourselves, on our minds, on our thoughts, on our actions. And he claims that the effects are not just on the personal level. It doesn't just affect your wallet, that subliminal ads will get you to spend more money than you planned. That's not the issue. The issue is the level of the community, of the society, of the country. And he views this effect, this manipulation, or this power that big technology companies have now as a serious threat to liberal democracies as we know it. So indeed, we all are enjoying the benefits of having those companies that do tremendous things, but we probably signed up for something that we didn't fully understand the meaning of it. And I know it's a bit much, but please bear with us. And once you listen to this conversation, I believe you'll be convinced that there's something to think about here. Just one additional note on today's episode. After Dr. Epstein had to leave us due to his schedule constraints, Zohar and I stayed and talked a little further. I had some feedback to Dr. Epstein's predictions that I was not able to put in front of him before he had to leave. So, Doctor, hope you listen and take my feedback under consideration, see if you agree with it or not. So I just wanted to put it out there. And also, anyone that wants to give us feedback or suggestions for guests, or, I don't know, you want to contribute in some way, you can contact us through our Twitter account, our email. Everything is linked here in the description. We also have a lot of links in the description here to everything we're talking about. You can find the resources down below. Okay, so as I mentioned, we'll have more English episodes in the near future. Our archive now includes episodes in Hebrew on various topics, so you can browse through our archive and hope you'll find it interesting if you know Hebrew. If not, then stay tuned. We'll have more for you soon. Okay, so now is the time where we'll give you Dr. Robert Epstein. Let's go. It's time to play the game.
It's time to play the game. Time to play the game! It's all about the game and how you play it. All about control. And if you can take it, all about your debt. And if you can pay it, it's all about pay. And who's gonna make it?
Hello and welcome to Mishak Milim, the podcast where Zohar and I attempt to sound a little bit smarter than we are, but never really succeed, Zohar.
And today in English.
In English. And if you think about it a little further, Zohar, you can interpret that in two ways, right? Never end up succeeding. All right. So how are you doing, Zohar?
Good. How are you?
All good.
Excited for today.
I'm Shachar, and we have here, Zohar and I have a guest that we've been very excited to to schedule and finally are able to do it. Dr. Robert Epstein. Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on board. We have around an hour, and the topic is complex, has a lot of details, so we'll dive right into it. But just before that, we'll let you introduce yourself a little bit. We'll be doing this in the exposition to this episode, but we're going to let you introduce yourself briefly in your own words. So take it away.
I'm Dr. Robert Epstein. I'm a senior research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology, which is in Southern California. I've been a researcher for almost 40 years. My PhD is from Harvard. I've published 15 books and I think more than 300 articles on various topics. And for the past 7.5 years, I've actually focused a lot of my research efforts on looking at the big tech companies, Google especially, and their ability to shift opinions and thinking and attitudes and beliefs and behavior and purchases and votes. And I've discovered about a dozen methods that they have available to them for doing this without people's knowledge and without leaving a paper trail, which pretty much puts these companies, Google, number one, Facebook to a somewhat lesser extent, and then smaller companies to a much lesser extent. It puts them in charge of the behavior and the thinking and possibly the feelings of more than 2.5 billion people around the world. It also puts them in charge of democracy because they can determine the outcomes of elections. If they're, especially in close elections, they can determine the outcomes of elections very easily without people knowing, and again, without leaving a paper trail. So, it's been quite a journey. I'm still on the journey. In fact, we have a whole new line of research we started just a few months ago that's on what we call the YouTube manipulation effect, which is probably the most powerful and frightening effect we've ever so far discovered and studied. But it's fascinating. I love research. I love finding out new things. In this case, of course, I'm finding out things that are, for the most part, very, very disturbing. And then recently we have, and this is fairly new over the past year, we've had a lot of leaks from Google and to some extent from Facebook. We've had whistleblowers come forward. We've had documents, email exchanges, videos, all of which confirm all of the warnings I've been giving now for, since 2012. These have been confirmed over and over and over again by the leaks from these companies.
All right. So before we dive into the leaks and the information in your research, what prompted you to start being interested in that subject? You say 2012. What was the trigger for you, or was it a slow cooking process?
And I'll try to sharpen the question. So behavioral psychology, right? That's the field of research, and this sounds like a bit more techy, like big tech, big data. So
sure,
what's the what are the parallels? How
are you using one to learn to research the other? Yeah.
Well, those are related questions, of course, and I've been a techie since I was a teenager, so that part's easy. I also helped to found, and I ran the first annual Turing test, which made the front page of the New York Times in 1991, and that's a contest that I directed for its first 5 years, and which is still held to this day at Bletchley Park, which is where Alan Turing cracked the Enigma code, the German Enigma code in World War II, which helped the Allies win the war. And so the annual Turing test, which is called the Loebner Prize competition, that was one of my babies. So I've been doing tech practically my whole life. My interest in Google started strangely on January 1st of the year 2012 when I got about I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10 emails from Google saying my website had been hacked and they were blocking access. And I thought to myself, what? I don't understand. Why is Google notifying me? Who made them the sheriff of the internet? And why wasn't I being notified by a government agency, by some nonprofit organization? Why a private company? Then I found out they had no customer service department, which is true to this day, which is very strange. And then I found out that although they can block access to websites, and believe me, they block access to millions of websites. At one point, there was a particular day where they blocked access to the entire internet for 40 minutes.
Where? In which country? Everywhere?
Around the world. Around the world.
What?
That was, I believe that was March 31st of 2009. I could be slightly wrong on the date. That was reported by The Guardian. The company did not deny it. And eventually I figured out why they blocked the internet for that period of time. And at that particular hour, I eventually figured that out, and I published that in an article in U.S. News and World Report in 2016. That was a big investigative article I wrote called The New Censorship. But the point is, January 1st, 2012, I got notified by Google that my website had been hacked and they were blocking access. And I started to just look at the company a little differently. For one thing, I found that they were blocking access not only on their own platforms, not only on Google.com, which makes sense, not only on, on Chrome, which and there was not just on their own platforms, but they were somehow blocking access through Safari, which is an Apple product, and even through Firefox, which is a browser run by a nonprofit organization called Mozilla. That made no sense to me at all. How were they pulling that off? So eventually, I figured those things out and published what I found. But the point is, I started to look at them differently, period. And toward the end of 2012, I noticed an emerging research area mainly in the field of marketing, where researchers were starting to quantify the impact of search position in Google search results. What impact does it have on clicks and on sales? And of course, these early studies were finding astonishing things. They were finding that if you just can move your company up just one notch in Google search results, that could increase your click-through rate by 30% or more.
That's interesting.
Moving up one notch.
That's interesting how the research is so lagging behind the business, because I've heard of that business of someone creating a method to to take you up the Google ranking. That was a whole business at least 15 years ago.
Right?
Maybe 14 years ago. Sorry, no, 15 years ago. And then you're talking about the research only in 2012. It's interesting. So this has been a business for years before the research. It's just an anecdote.
Absolutely correct. But the point is, the researchers, though, yes, definitely they were lagging, but they wanted to understand this, and that's interesting. They were doing eye tracking studies, for example, finding that people's eyes just go to those top again, even if the best answer to the question is down below. The eye will go down briefly, then come right back up to the top, and you end up with roughly 50% of all clicks going to the top 2 items, 95% of all clicks going to the first page of search results. I mean, very few people going beyond that. So I asked a simple question. This was late 2012. Well, if people are so trusting of high-ranking search results, could we use search results to shift people's opinions, to shift people's beliefs, maybe even to shift their voting preferences? So January 2013, I started the first of many, many experiments on what eventually I called SEAM, the Search Engine Manipulation Effect, or SEME, and found that indeed when we presented people, and these are randomized controlled experiments, when we presented people with search results that favored one political candidate, and by favored I mean if they clicked up high, they'd end up on a web page that makes that candidate look really good compared to his or her competitor. I found that we could shift people's opinions about the candidate, and if they're undecided voters, I should point that out. If, starting with undecided voters, we could shift people's opinions about the candidate, but also we could shift their voting preferences. I predicted initially we could shift voting preferences by 2 or 3%. In the very first experiment that we ran, the shift was over 48% after one search. So I did not believe that result. Repeated the experiment with new participants, got a shift of 63%, and then began to learn that we could cause these shifts to occur by masking what we were doing just a little bit in such a way that no one had any idea at all that they were even seeing biased search results, that they were seeing search results favoring one candidate. People could not see that, and yet we could still produce large shifts. And a couple months later, we did a national study, more than 2,000 people in all 50 states in the United States. Again, produced a very large shift, virtually no one aware of any bias. In a study that large, there were a few people who were aware. And the really bad news here was that the people who seemed to notice the bias, they shifted even farther in the direction of the bias. So simply seeing a bias doesn't protect you from the bias. The point is, we had stumbled onto a new form of influence, a new form of manipulation, if you will, that was made possible by the internet, made possible by the creation of the search engine that had never existed before in human history. And it was a very dangerous kind of influence because people were unaware of it. Very dangerous also because search results are ephemeral, to use the term they use inside of Google, because when people are generating search results, they're having an ephemeral experience. In other words, a fleeting experience that leaves no trace. It's not stored anywhere. You can't go back in time and see what search results people were shown. So we had a new effect here that's incredibly dangerous because people can't see it. It leaves no paper trail, and it's in the hands of one monopoly, which basically controls the search, about 92% of search in almost every country in the world. That meant we were onto something. This was something very, very, very serious. We went to India in 2014, right in the middle of their huge Lok Sabha national election, the largest democratic election in the world. Replicated the effect again in India, this time with real voters right in the middle of a real election. I found we could produce shifts easily of 20% or more, and in some demographic groups of over 60%.
So can we dive in to explain this just for a second?
Sure.
So when you say a 20% shift, because it's undecided voters, you expect a 50-50 split. That's the ground truth that you start from. All right. So you expect a 50-50 split.
No, that's what we get. We get a 50-50 split before the search.
Yeah, I'm saying that's what you expect before the search. Then you manipulate the search, which we'll discuss in a second, and then you see up. When you say 20 point shift, you mean 70-30 instead of 50-50. That's what you mean, or do you?
I mean specifically, if we're starting at 50-50, which is normally, in fact, where we start, because we're starting with undecided voters, and we ask them questions about the candidates before they do the search.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But let's just say we have 100 people, so we have 50 going one way, 50 the other. If we say, who would you vote for right now if you had to vote? So that's how they start. That's based on very minimal information, a couple of sentences about each candidate. And so now we have 50-50. And when I say a 20% shift, that means on the for candidate A, where I have 50 voters, I'm taking 20% of them. So I'm taking 10.
So 60-40, that's 20% point shift.
50, and right. So I end up with a win margin of 20% by shifting 20% of the voters on one side. Except, of course, these are randomized controlled experiments, so we're shifting people in either direction that we choose, which, that's, again, where the power lies in this type of technique.
So I
You
think describing...
you also have a control group.
Yeah,
that
so
you don't
let's talk about the
manipulate at all.
methodology. Let's talk about the methodology just to build the case, right?
But wait, just a tiny question before that. So I've known for years that when I type in a search in Google or whatever, Bing or Yahoo or whatever, I get the most abundant result that people click on. I mean,
No.
That's what I thought for years until I heard.
No, that's their marketing. That's their marketing. That's absolutely false.
So
that's what they started with, perhaps when Google became Google. Their algorithm was good. That's the Google ranking, an algorithm that chooses the website that has the most relevance and most clicks.
It's not necessarily the most popular result or the most accurate one. It's manipulated in some other way that we don't know behind the scenes, right?
Well, over the years, yes, the search algorithm changed, and it became more and more personalized, more and more customized, which makes sense because, of course, they're trying to match you up with vendors, with people trying to sell you products and services. So the more personalized they can make your search results, obviously the better they can do that matching and the more money they can make. They make money more efficiently to the extent that they can personalize, can customize what they're showing you. So as that happens, obviously they're moving away from the initial model, which just had to do with, number of links pointing to a web page. That's really was the initial model of the so-called page rank algorithm. But they moved away from that, and they moved towards personalization, which meant that they had more and more power, not just to match you up with vendors, but to shift your opinions and beliefs and attitudes and purchases, and to shift your thinking and behavior without you knowing it. Now, they can't just shift the thinking and behavior of anybody, because some of us are strongly committed to one position or another. But people who are undecided, and we're all undecided about something every day, where to go on vacation, where to go out for dinner, any area where you're undecided, they know what that is, because of course they have massive profiles on every single one of us. The equivalent, if you've been using the internet for 20 years, they have the equivalent of, I know this sounds impossible, but it's actually true. They have the equivalent of about 3 million pages of information about each and every one of us. So based on the profile information they have, they can do very precise targeting and customization. And more, they've been using not just search results, but search suggestions and answer boxes, news feeds. More and more, they've been using these, not just to make more money for the company, but to promote the company's values. And we know this without any doubt from whistleblowers and from leaks of documents and videos and email exchanges. They have multiple agendas. One is to make money. Another is to promote their values worldwide. Because again, the more I've learned about all this, the more concerned I've become, partly because I have 5 children. I'm very worried about the world they're growing up in. I'm leaving this world fairly soon, I think, but my kids should be around quite a while. And these companies have power that no dictator has ever had, no company has ever had, and they're unregulated. No one is challenging these companies. No one is trying to curtail their power, and their power, I can tell you, is about to grow by leaps and bounds over the next few months.
Go ahead, Zoe.
So I see 2 levels of what you're saying. The first is, are these companies, or this company, Google specifically, is able to do this SEAM, the search engine manipulation effect? Is it possible? That's the first level. The second level is, are they doing it? Is it actually happening?
Wait, before that, sorry, I want to stop.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the methodology of how you got to your conclusion, and then we'll talk about what's happening in the field. But in real time. But I just wanted to note, you were talking about 3 million pages worth of information. May I remind us all, most of us are using, after we started using the search engine, we may have started using their email service. And maybe that's not enough. We started using their browser, and that's more information. And maybe even if we started using our iPhones or our mobile phones, then they created an operational system, Android. So they have, wherever we go, if we're using anything from Google, and again, we're talking here specifically about Google, we'll touch other big tech companies later on, they have vast amounts of information. Even if we're trying to be, as disconnected as we can, the minute we go somewhere with our phones, if it's an Android phone, they got a lot of information from there. So that's my addition to your comment before. Now let's talk about the SEAM, search engine manipulation effect methodology to build a case for the effect that you're talking about, the 20% effect and more that you described. So you took 3 groups, right? They were all undecided. The way you knew they were undecided is because you gave them questions about foreign politics somewhere else, correct? So
in the early experiments, yes.
Okay, so just you can clarify and maybe add nuance to what I'm saying, but just to make the case, all right. Politics from somewhere you don't know, right? From the Netherlands.
Right.
You're undecided. Right. We're asking you a question. 3 groups. One group you wanna shift to side A. The other group you wanna shift to side B. And the third group is the controlled group. No shift, right? Ask them a question Correct. Before they answer, and the expectation and the results, correct me if I'm wrong, was 50-50 split, give or take a statistical margin, right?
Right.
And then...
let me add to that we're using real search results and real web pages. The only difference between the 3 groups is the order in which the search results are presented.
All right. So you ask them to make searches to get more informed? They independently go and put search in the browser you built for them? Yes. Correct. So they need to gather more information. They ask their computer questions, the search engine. You have a Google search engine that's monitored. So you're using some platform that uses the same algorithm or almost identical algorithm, but you control what's coming up, right? So you Correct. Simulate the Google search engine. So they are going to look for information. For group A, you rank it in a way that favors A. For group B, you rank it in a way that favors B. For group C, you're not manipulating it at all. And then you see the results.
They're
right?
mixed up. For the control group, the search results are they're mixed up. They're all mixed up. They alternate between A and B.
Got it. All right. So that was describing the methodology, and then from there you really see the difference between A, B, and C, and you can manipulate them. It's not like it only shifts towards the candidate with the blonde hair, right? It shifts to whatever you want it, wherever you want it to shift.
Correct.
All right. So I had to describe that just to explain how you're getting to those numbers, because I can say after without any research, I could say, yeah, it has an effect, but the question is, how do you get to those numbers? And I think this was a general description of what you've been doing, and I'm sure you've expanded on that and did follow up researches and experiments. All right. So after we described it, Zoa was asking, is it happening for real? Does it have an effect in real life, or is it just theory?
Right. So that's a totally different question, because the experiments show us the power that these companies have to shift opinions and votes. They just show us the power. That doesn't mean their companies are exercising that power. And by the way, SEAM was just the first of many effects that we've discovered. So that's just the earliest work. I mean, we're still studying SEAM, but there are other effects. There's SSE and DDE and ABE, and there are a whole bunch of them, and they're all different, and they're all very powerful, and they're all very frightening. But Zohar is definitely raising a good question. So they have these powers. That's undeniable because that's what the experiments show. But do they use the powers? So in 2015, I was contacted by the Attorney General of one of our states here, one of our U.S. states, and he was very, very concerned because he was up for re-election. In some of our states, we elect our Attorney General, which is very strange. But the point is, he was up for re-election. He was fighting Google. He had sued Google on behalf of his state, and Google had sued him back. The Attorney General of a state was sued by this company as an individual. So, I mean, Google is very, very, very aggressive in court. And he was concerned, and he wondered whether they could, maybe steal the election from him. And if so, how would they do it? So I had been doing, at that point, 2.5 years of experiments. I told him what I found. And then he raised the same question that Zohar just raised, which is, but how do we know? How would we know that they're doing it? And we discussed that, and he said, well, in law enforcement, we would set up bots, or sock puppets, they call them, fake people, and we would see whether we're getting some bias in search results. And I said, well, that won't work. I said, that will not work at all, because Google knows the difference between a bot and a real person, because they have a big, long profile on real people, and bots, they have nothing. They know who's a bot. I said, so you won't get anything. I said, you'll get nothing. You'll see no bias at all. I said, you'd have to literally be looking over the shoulders of real people, real voters, to find out. And he said, well, how would you do that? I said, I have no idea. And that was the end of that conversation. And I became obsessed. At that point, I became obsessed. I said, I'm going to figure this out. I am going to figure this out. And 2016 was, of course, presidential election year in the U.S. That's when Trump ran, and against Hillary Clinton. So I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I managed early 2016 to raise some money to try to set up the first ever online election monitoring system that would allow us to look over the shoulders of real voters and see what search results they were getting when they conducted election-related searches on not just Google, but Google, Bing, and Yahoo. For comparison purposes, we threw in Bing and Yahoo as well. And we recruited 95, we call them field agents, 95 field agents, real voters in 24 states. And we developed and installed special software on their computers. So these are real people. We protected their identities. This is very similar, by the way, to what the Nielsen company has been doing since 1950. And Nielsen is in Israel, too. And they're in 100 countries now. And Nielsen recruits families in secret. They equip them with special equipment that allows Nielsen to
So Nielsen are tracking ratings and exposure, and for television, that's their business. They help you quantify.
Extremely helpful and also very powerful business, because those ratings determine how much the shows can charge for advertisements. They determine whether or not a show stays on the air or not. So very important. So Nielsen's very good at setting up a system like this and protecting people's identity. So that's what we did. But we did it, of course, using special software. And we found, in fact, in the weeks leading up to the 2016 election, highly statistically significant, that is at the 0.001 level, bias in all 10 search positions on the first page of Google search results favoring Hillary Clinton, whom I supported, but no such bias on Bing or Yahoo. So there it was, actual highly statistically significant bias favoring one candidate, not just in the top 2 positions, but on all 10 positions on the first page of search results. So we deliberately took our time in analyzing the data. We didn't want to interfere with the election itself, partly because Trump is so unpredictable, and he kept saying the election was rigged. And, we didn't want to release some evidence supporting his crazy ideas, because who knows what he would do. He would go to the Supreme Court and ask them to shut down Google or something. Who knows what he would do. So we didn't release the information until we had submitted it for peer review at a scientific meeting. Then we shared what we had found with the Washington Post, and the Washington Post published about our findings in March of 2016, at which point no one really cared because Trump was already president. And that was fine with us. That was fine with us. We didn't want to cause a commotion, a stir. So in 2018, we set up a somewhat larger system. I should point out, in 2016, we preserved more than 13,000 election-related searches on Google, Bing, and Yahoo, and about 100,000 web pages to which the search results linked. In 2018, a slightly larger system with 160 field agents, and this focused mainly on 3 staunchly Republican congressional districts, all of which flipped Democrat in 2018. And we preserved more than 47,000 searches on Google, Bing, and Yahoo, and nearly 400,000 web pages. And again, we found pro-Democrat bias in all 10 search positions on the first page of Google search results. Pro-liberal, pro-Democrat bias, but not on Bing or Yahoo. Once again, now that in 2016, that level of bias, if people had seen that level of bias nationwide, that would have shifted somewhere between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes to Hillary Clinton, with no one knowing that this had occurred, and of course without leaving a paper trail, because search results are ephemeral.
So that's extrapolating your research that we described before. You're saying, all right, the percentage of undecided voters is X, and then this is the range of influence that we measured. So it's anywhere between 2.6 and 10 point. What did you say? 10.4 million. All right.
You said that so precisely. I wish I had said it myself. And then in 2018, if the level of bias we measured had been present nationwide, that would have shifted upwards of 78.2 million votes to Democratic candidates, with no one knowing this had occurred and without leaving a paper trail. Now, in 2018 was a midterm election, not a national election, so the 78.2 million votes would have been spread across hundreds of races. But still, that's a lot of votes, especially, again, when you consider that no one knows that this is being done, and there's no paper trail. You can't go back in time. The only ephemeral content, the only ephemeral experiences that are being preserved were being preserved by me and my team. I mean, there is no general system. Yeah. There is no general system for doing this. But there needs to be. There needs to be a general system for doing this year round.
If we're talking about the research being, we're talking about the research lagging, then the government, will lag.
Well, what I'm saying here is based on what we keep learning from research, we know that monitoring systems must exist, and they must be permanent, because there is no other way to protect democracy, to protect free speech, to protect human autonomy from manipulations by new technologies, unless you have monitoring systems in place. Laws and regulations move very, very slowly, if they move at all. But monitoring is tech. You see? Tech can keep up with tech, but laws and regulations cannot.
I have a small technical question. So let's say you installed your devices, your software in my computer, and I want to type in a search. So it automatically give me results from all 3 search engines? Or do I need to go into each and every one of these?
No, you have total control over where you're searching, how you're searching, where you're searching. We don't interfere with that. The only one area that we interfere with, and we learned that we had to do this in 2016, is we're only interested, no matter what you're searching for, we're only interested in searches that you conduct using neutral search terms. Because you see, if you're typing in something like Trump is an idiot, then of course you're going to get search results that confirm that Trump is an idiot. But if you just type in Trump, or you just type in the wall, or you just type in immigration, those are neutral search terms. And that's the real question. What are these search engines showing you when you type in neutral search terms? So the only search terms that we were actually tracking were terms from a list. So in 2016, we had a list of 250 search terms that we were interested in that had been judged by independent raters, independent judges, to be neutral. In 2018, we actually had a very prominent journalist create special lists of for the 3 congressional districts that we were in, of several thousand search terms that were pertinent to those particular districts, those congressional districts, all of which were judged to be neutral, again, by independent judges. We're just interested in neutral search terms. This is very, very important. And I've seen the here and there where people try to criticize my work. They don't seem to understand that we're using neutral search terms. That's extremely important. We're, of course you can force a search engine to give you biased results. That's not the question. The question is, what happens if you're asking something neutral? What does it give you then? It should not give you biased results.
Let me
your data set. So Shacha. Okay, so your data set is mostly, I'm guessing, Google searches then. Like you said,
it ends up being mostly Google searches, and that's appropriate because you see, Bing and Yahoo don't actually have any impact on elections because Bing gets only about 2% of search. Yahoo gets well under 1%. So,
but then that's your ability to estimate whether they're manipulating as well. You said that there is no bias in these search engines. Your ability to estimate that is lower then, right?
Sort of, except again, if you're only preserving a few hundred searches, of course, you could say nothing probably, with such small numbers. But if you preserve 13,000 searches, you have enough data in all 3 areas. And again, in 2018, we preserved more than 47,000 searches. This year, we hope to preserve far more. And we do have a web page where we kind of describe the current project and where we ask people to support us financially if they're able, and that's at stopbigtechnow.com. Stopbigtechnow.com.
A link below. Yeah. So let me give you credit where it's due for intellectual honesty for a second, because you glossed over it. And you were in 2016 a Hillary Clinton supporter, but called out the bias in favor of Hillary Clinton. And I think also in 2018 you had the side that you favored. Is it true to say that you're a Democrat, so you favored the Democrat in 2018 as well? I'm just trying to say you're going against your political inclination, so this is intellectual honesty. That's what I'm.
Well, more important, mishpacha is a very important word, of course, in our lives, and or as my grandfather would have said, mishpacha is the way he would have said it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the point is that it's not just me. I do lean left. I would call myself maybe a liberal. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, it's my whole family. It's my friends. It's everyone I know. So yes, when I'm revealing what I found, I'm causing myself a world of pain. Yes, because I don't even know any conservatives really. I've met some lately because of my research, but I'm just not in that world.
Your whole environment.
Bone in my whole body.
And you're calling out, you're basically saying, all right, we are riding this tiger, right? Now it's in our favor. That's how we may see it, right? Towards the liberal side, the democratic side, and we want to wield it and maneuver it, but you don't ride tigers. And this
No,
tiger
well, that's the whole
may
point. You
yeah.
know, the point is, I believe in democracy. I believe in the free and fair election. I believe in, human autonomy. I believe in free speech more than I believe in any particular party or candidate. I mean, that's just silly to say, well, they're helping us right now, so let's stick with them. Let's give them more power. Let's give them unlimited power. That's absurd. This is what they're doing is extremely dangerous. And if you go country by country, by the way, they don't necessarily support people on the left. In Cuba, where the government obviously is left, and where the government doesn't like companies like Google, Google supports the right in Cuba. When Google works with the Chinese, they're helping the Chinese dictatorship to control the Chinese population. Google does whatever the heck Google wants to do. So just because they're supporting Democrats now in this country, that to me, that's a trivial point. That is not justification for withholding criticism of these companies.
The issue is power and the controls on that power and the ability to not just criticize, but even monitor, as you said, that power and its effects. I wanted to ask you about the setup that you may have for 2020, which is I think it would be fair to say that it's a very critical, one of the most influencing. I think people say it every election cycle, but it feels like, by the way, I've never said it. I think I've never said it, but I think 2020 is really pivotal in the life of this country of United States, because the polarization is so big, and any influence there, or whatever result is going to happen, will maybe take the polarization a notch just upwards. So this is a very crucial election cycle, and I'm sure you're not giving up. You're still monitoring this, and pretty sure you have a more extensive research engine that you're conducting. Can you describe it a little bit if you have it set up?
Well, I wish that were true, but it turns out it's not true.
Okay.
Because the funding we had lined up for February, everything fell apart because of the virus. And then finally, when people's attention started to turn to the election again, we found we did not have funds to set up a system. So, I tried, and my colleagues tried very, very hard, and some very prominent people in the U.S., prominent people in media, also tried to raise the money. And only recently, only in the past couple of weeks, one particular media personality, his name is Glenn Beck, he went on the air on his radio show, on his TV show. He set up this special page, which is stopbigtechnow.com, to try to raise money to set up a monitoring project. He got more than 5,000 people. I mean, very rapidly, he got more than 5,000 people to donate. Some donated $1. One person donated $10,000. But it's not enough money. And we are, right this minute, we're struggling because we're so close to the election. We're struggling. We want to capture some data if we can, but we don't have the money or the resources that we had in these previous elections. Now, this is really a tragedy because I think you've understated how important this year is, because Trump is a very unpredictable man. I mean, everyone agrees to that. Everyone, whether they love him or hate him, they know he's unpredictable. And in that sense, he's potentially quite dangerous for the world. So, there's a lot at stake here in the U.S. regarding who wins this year. But there's another reason why this year is so critical, because this is the year when we either fight big tech or we surrender democracy to big tech. I'm not exaggerating. That is exactly true, because in Obama's second term, Google took over Washington, D.C. The first thing Obama did in his second term was shut down the antitrust investigations that were in progress, shut them down right after someone from Google visited the White House. This was in January of 2013. During his second term, 250 people switched high positions at Google from high positions in his administration. There were more than 450 visits to the White House by Google representatives. That's about 10 times more than any other company. Wow. 6 federal agencies were being run by former Google executives. His chief technology officer, former Google executive. Hillary Clinton's chief technology officer, former Google executive, et cetera, et cetera. That's Obama's second term. They took over DC. Now, under Trump, and I'm no Trump supporter, but under Trump, they all got kicked out, all of them. The last one was head of the U.S. Patent Office. And under Trump, multiple investigations of Google and Facebook have been launched by our Federal Trade Commission, our Department of Justice, more recently our Federal Communications Commission, both houses of Congress, and attorneys general from almost every state. What will happen in January of next year after Biden is elected is that all of these investigations will be shut down. And with Democrats in control of our entire government, and with Democrats in the pockets of these companies, especially Google, because they take a lot of money from Google, and Google shifts a lot of votes to these candidates, to these politicians, I don't think we'll ever get democracy back. That nothing will be done. Nothing will be done to curtail the power of these big tech companies.
I think the usual zeitgeist quotes 1984, Orwell's 1984, but I'm very I'm inclined to go there because it's easy and all that. But I think 1984 is not the right book. I think Brave New World is the better book to describe what you're saying here, because Brave New World is not a dark place. It's a happy place, but it's totalitarian and terrible, right? They're programming you from as a baby, and everyone's happy. They don't know that they've been programmed, and it's
and they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and it's nihilistic and it's take soma for bliss and all that, and it feels more like that because you get served your view the next video and the subliminal programming and all that. So Brave New World, I think, doesn't get its due for how much it describes what's happening and on many levels, right? We're not gonna talk about all of that, but I think what you're describing is Brave New World. Give it to the tech company. That their God there is not God. It's Ford, who was at the time.
Well, there might even be a better book that was written before either of those books, and it was written by a Russian named Zamyatin. It was first published in English in 1924, I believe. He couldn't publish it under Stalin, but he published it in English in London, and it's called We, W-E, We. And it's a dystopian novel that's quite extraordinary, and it's about a society in which every single thing that everyone does is observed, and all of the walls in all of the homes are made of clear glass. And the only time that you can pull down a shade to get a little privacy is to have sex with someone. There's lots of sex, but you have to have permission first from the government, and you can only pull down your shade for 1 hour. And so, that's a society too in which everyone's kind of happy, but their privacy doesn't exist in any form in that world. And what I'm saying is you can pick your dystopian version, your dystopian
Yeah.
society. But you're right. This is a society in which you see, we're here now. That people don't understand that we're here now. This is not coming next year. We're already here now. These companies, these mega monopolies, are function virtually unchallenged every single place in the world outside of China, which has, of course, it's even worse.
Worst forms, worst companies,
mechanisms in place to control people. And they don't even hide it, because it's the government itself that's doing it. But outside of China and outside of North Korea, where no one has internet, we're talking about, basically two companies that are now impacting very deliberately and strategically, as far as I can tell. They're impacting the thinking and behavior of more than 2.5 billion people. Within a year and a half, that number will exceed 4 billion. And there's nothing is being done. Nothing is being done to constrain these companies. They're even when there's bad news about the company and they get a fine of some sort. I mean, Google was fined last year in the U.S. $5 billion. I'm sorry, Facebook was fined.
Shake off the dust and keep going, right? That doesn't affect.
Oh, they don't.
Them, they don't notice.
Facebook put that money aside even before they were fined. In the EU has fined Google since 2017. They've fined them 4 times over 10 billion euros. What's happened is the revenues from these companies keep increasing at 10, 20, 30% per year. Google's revenues last year were over $160 billion, and they just keep going up and up and up faster and faster and faster. So, I think we're in a very serious
What do you think
here
needs to be done except the monitoring system? By the way, are we too late for 2020 for you to set up your system, or if everyone that listens donates today, we're going to be you're going to be able to set up those?
If people donate, that helps us, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're setting up something, but the problem is, you see, to scale it up, in other words, to bring in more field agents costs more money. That's where most of the money is spent.
Yeah.
So the recruiting and the equipping and the training and the protecting the field
agents. And
it
takes time.
The more money that comes in, the more we can recruit. And if we have enough people in place and have enough data coming in the last couple of weeks before the election, well, number one, we could preserve maybe several 100,000 ephemeral experiences. That would be helpful, obviously, for authorities. And we could make announcements about what we're finding and get these companies possibly to back off during those very critical days right before the election. If they don't back off and we're making announcements and we have the data, there's a risk. They're taking a tremendous risk that criminal charges could be brought against their top executives for violating campaign finance law in the United States, because what they're doing, in effect, is making very, very large in-kind donations to campaigns without declaring that. And that's a felony in the United States. So no, we're trying, but as I say, there's definitely a tragedy in the making here, because this year, partly because of the virus, the money did not turn up, which is crazy, because this year is very important.
So if I'm trying to understand your path for a solution or a resolution to this, monitoring systems, sunlight as the best disinfectant. Show this, expose, they'll back off because of public atmosphere or public pushback. If they don't, it's criminal, and that's the way forward. Make it transparent, expose it, and that that's the best case scenario for you.
Well,
right?
let me say that both short term and long term, I think monitoring is the ultimate protection that we have from companies like this, not just from Google, but from the next Google and the Google after that. Now, having said that, I also, the day before I testified before the U.S. Congress last summer of 2019, about these issues, I published an article in Bloomberg Businessweek, which describes a very, very simple kind of regulation, very light touch regulation, that would end Google's worldwide monopoly on search. And that is simply to make their index, that's the database they use to generate search results, to make their index public. And in other words, to give everyone access to that database through an API, which means that you could set up your own search platform drawing on Google's data. I could set one up. Small companies, large companies, because we'd end up with thousands of specialized search engines, each catering to different audiences, each trying to draw different audiences. It would be the exact duplicate of what is occurring in media. That's exactly how media works. All media draws on the same pool of information, namely, what happened today in the world. And, we would have thousands of search engines. We would have competition in search, which there used to be in the beginning. I mean, Google was not the first search engine. They were the 21st search engine. Excuse me. So we would have competition again in search because, again, Google was not the first search engine. They were the 21st search engine. And we would have innovation in search. And there's been no innovation in search now for about 20 years. So that's the very simple solution. It's from a regulatory perspective, it's very, very light touch regulation. And I have been contacted by members of Congress who are very interested in this. This could be done easily in the U.S., but it could also be done in the EU. Because Google is a worldwide company. So that's another way, at least to tackle one problem, which is of course Google's monopoly on search. So there are possible solutions. There are some things we can do. Now, this is what's going to actually happen, though. What's going to actually happen is that the Democrats are going to sweep this country in November. They're going to sweep Washington, D.C. All of these investigations will be shut down in January, and these companies will consolidate their power and expand their power. And we will surrender this year. We will be surrendering democracy, free speech, and human autonomy to these companies. I don't see any way that this could not happen. Now, I'm going to try to collect as much data as I possibly can. I'm going to try to make what announcements I can. But I'm one person, for goodness sake. Why aren't there hundreds of people doing the kinds of research that I'm doing? Why aren't there major universities doing the kinds of research that I'm doing? You know why?
Money.
One word. Google. Well, you say money. Okay. Same thing. It's Google. Google, in fact, this year, starting last year, they did something really smart. They started giving millions of dollars to conservative organizations, including the Heritage Foundation. In other words, they actually they started giving money to the organizations that support Republicans, conservatives, and that support Donald Trump. These organizations are all taking money now from Google. So they will not do anything to challenge Google. That's a tough enemy to fight, obviously.
So I have a pretty naive question. I don't know if you have the answer, but I want to hear your take on it. So what you're claiming is that we have a worldwide conspiracy that Google actually aims at manipulating people. It's worldwide because I'm saying it is actually a conspiracy of the executives, right? Of Google. They're conspiring to manipulate the people. And what the question is, the naive question is, what's their aim? What's the final goal?
Well, again, you have to just look at the leaks, and especially a video called The Selfish Ledger, which is an 8-minute video that leaked about a year and a half ago. And The Selfish Ledger was made internally at Google, was never intended to be seen outside of Google. And it explains very clearly that Google has the power to re-engineer humanity for the better, according to company values. Company values are specifically mentioned in the film.
In these words?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
In fact, I can send you a link. I made a transcript of the film. It's much easier to see what's in the film looking
Please
at the
do.
transcript, obviously. So if you want that, I can get you that. I think it's listed on my list of publications, which is also on my website.
We'll
But
look
I'd be
for
happy
it.
to send you that link, and you can look at that. But also, you just have to look at what the whistleblowers are telling us. This is no secret. Google, it was founded by utopian thinkers. They hire people who are utopian thinkers. Utopians are dangerous. Zuckerberg is a little less dangerous because he's definitely not a utopian. But Google, no, there's no question. There's also a very good book, by the way, called Move Fast and Break Things. It's written by a friend of mine. And Move Fast and Break Things focuses on the personalities of the top executives, the top tech executives in Silicon Valley. And, these are, generally speaking, very smart, extremely arrogant people who think they know better. They think they know better, and they know how to solve the ills of humankind, and they know they have the tools, and they're using the tools. I wouldn't call that a conspiracy. It is what it is. These are people who have
Agenda.
power that no one's ever had
power.
before, and they're exercising that power in ways that they believe will benefit humankind. That's not a conspiracy.
There's also another document leaked, The Good Censor. So those
Absolutely.
those names are just dystopian to me, but for, I guess, to them it's a good thing. The Good Censor. Okay.
Well, it's not only that. If you look at the documents that Zach Voorhees stole from the company last year and turned over to the Department of Justice, you'll be stunned. If you really look into them, especially if you have a tech background, you will be stunned.
Who is he? Sorry for the ignorance.
Zach Voorhees, Vorhies. Zach Voorhees was a senior software engineer at Google for 8.5 years, walked away from, I think, a salary of something like $250,000 a year, plus benefits, plus stock. He walked away, and he took with him 950 pages of documents and a video. And among those documents, 2 of them are blacklists that are actually called blacklists. Now, I wrote about 9 of Google's blacklists in 2016 because I knew they existed because I'm a programmer, but I had never seen one. And here it is, 2019, and Zach walks out of Google with 2 of Google's blacklists that are called blacklists. How idiotic is that? See, you know what it is? It's arrogance. It's extreme arrogance because they know they're untouchable. And so they just do whatever they want. But they're also among those documents, there are multiple documents on what they're calling algorithmic fairness. And you've got to see it to believe it. You've got to see it to believe it. Because basically what they're saying is they are using the tools they have, such as the search engine and other tools, for social engineering purposes. And they call it algorithmic fairness.
Oh, okay.
And so they're showing search results, images, anything they can show people in a way that corrects what they think are defects in people's thinking, defects in society. It's their mission to correct them. There's more in there. There's a manual for a software system called Twiddler. For years and years, whenever my research made it into the news, Google always responded with the same statement. We do not re-rank search results to favor any political party. And I always said, at that point, I said, I've never accused them of re-ranking anything. What is that? What is re-ranking? Where did that come from? Why do they keep saying that over and over again? One of the manuals that Zach took from Google is a manual for a system they call Twiddler. And what is Twiddler? It says on the front page of the manual, it's software they use to re-rank search results. According to their particular mission, their particular agenda, their values, they re-rank search results.
Yeah. I think it's Thomas Sowell that said the worst kind of ignorance is the ignorance of the educated. So those who are really smart, right, and perhaps educated and have influential positions, they are, first of all, arrogant, and second of all, can't tell what they're educated in and what they're not educated in. And this is political philosophy, how do you build a better company, a better society, sorry. And that is put into the hands of the most brilliant engineers, right, that you can think of, but it doesn't mean that they know what to do with it, right? That power for engineering a society, if anyone should have that power, right?
You know what?
I would argue no one. Yeah.
I don't care whether these people are smart or stupid. I don't care whether I like their values or I like their values. You cannot have that much power in the hands of a private company, which is accountable to no one. Accountable to no one, no government, no one. They're accountable to no one. Facebook is even worse than Google in that respect because Zuckerberg has complete power. He's not even accountable to his shareholders because he has a separate class of stock. He is accountable to no one at all. So you cannot have this much power in the hands of people who are not accountable to the public, not accountable to any public anywhere. That is absurd. And someday people will look back at this time in history and think, how did we ever get ourselves into this crazy position? 1961, President Eisenhower, in his farewell speech before John F. Kennedy became president, President Eisenhower gave a speech which is famous to this day because he warned about the rise of the military-industrial complex, which was extraordinary for him to say since he was a general who led the Allied forces in World War II. He was an insider warning about the military-industrial complex. But if you go back and read that speech, you'll be shocked because that's not all he warned about. He warned about the rise of a technological elite that could control public policy without people knowing. That was in 1961. Wow. He said we had to be vigilant to make sure that these things never happen. We have not been vigilant. That is where we are now. The technological elite exists. They are running much of the world in ways that people cannot see, cannot counter, cannot go back in time and examine. That is where we are now. We're already there. All that's going to happen in the next few months because of this election, all that's going to happen is that all the investigations will be shut down. I mean, they're just going to consolidate the power. It'll just be almost blatantly obvious that something has gone wrong. But very few of us will understand the details. But I am unfortunately out of time. I do want to mention for your listeners that if they want to learn more about my work or they want to support my work, they can go to stopbigtechnow.com. I think there's another link that works too, which is mygoogleresearch.com. I think that also works. So you've got two possible links. And gosh, I think you guys are amazing. I wish I could stay on with you for another hour, but
we thank you for the time.
For me. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you for the time.
And I wish you all the best. And I have not been to Haaretz for a long time, and I would love to visit again. So
we'll give you good hospitality if you come.
I would love to come, and there's so many good foods there. I miss so much that you can't get here. Yeah. But anyway, we'll talk about that off the air sometime. But thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. I just want to say that your research and your work is tremendously important. I really hope you're wrong about the next 6 months, and let's see. I mean, I guess you don't want to be right on this one as well.
Right. Exactly right. Well put. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right. So just to close this, I think it was tremendously important, and I don't think we have any illusions or delusions in saying, oh, they're exploiting us or something like that. I think all of us are stepping into this with open eyes, or I don't know, with eyes directed at what we want to look at and not what we need to look at. So it's not like they're exploiting the population. I think the population is just not aware of what we are doing to ourselves in some way. So public awareness is the way to battle this. I will say that his prediction, that Dr. Epstein's prediction about the election, is a risky one, because if he's right, then maybe it's too late. But if he's wrong, it will take people's eyes off the ball, right? If he's wrong and there's not a democratic sweep, then he'll really struggle to keep this very important research going. So it's just a risk. I wanted to tell him this, but just because the lack of time, and he had to drop. So sorry for saying this without you on the call. I just didn't want to end up on that note with him on the call. But any thoughts?
I'm just thinking, we mostly talked about the Google search engine, but I was thinking the impact that Google has on my life. Well, there is the Google search engine, of course, and I also use Chrome, and there is Gmail, and there is Google Maps, and there is
Drive,
Android, and there is, I don't know, and Google Plus, and so, and I know that they have plenty of other apps that I don't know of even, and they basically have all, I mean, all the information.
Put Google Assistant, Google Nest, all of those things that keep recording them all the time.
So it's probably true that they have all the information about me. And I mean, I think that he shows clearly that they have, I mean, I read some of the articles. He shows that they do have the power to do these kinds of manipulations. The real question for me is what is the extent that they are using it deliberately? And he just blew my mind now.
Yeah, those documents. Those documents are around for years now. Right after the 2016 election, you have that video of Google executives really saying how they did the country wrong and how it won't happen again. And
I'm someone who I consider myself being like up to date with current events, and I didn't hear about that at all. All I heard is about the Russian interference and the collusion and all that kind of stuff. And I think that even if it's true, it's not as important as this one, because this is astonishing. This is really important. And it's worldwide, as you said. Everyone uses their softwares.
Yeah, we just scratched the surface, I believe. All right, so whatever your opinion is politically, again, this is riding the tiger or riding the dragon, and then you never know when you're gonna find yourself on the wrong end of that dragon's mouth. Okay, so. In case it's the first time you're listening, everything we discussed will be in the links here in the description, or at least whatever we could track that would be here as links. We usually end with a cultural recommendation. So do you want to go, Zoa?
Yeah. So I started listening to an audiobook that you must know. And I've known for years, but I never had a chance to actually read or hear it. So I did it, and it's The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. So I know the concepts, I know the general ideas, but this book is terrific because he explains things in such a simple tone, and does a really good job of explaining complicated ideas, and it's really interesting. I recommend it. The Selfish Gene.
The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. I will recommend something just to turn off your brain a little bit and enjoy what we once upon a time, we were able to do it when we were watching sports or something like that. Now we can't. But there's a show that I recommended the first season, its first season, which is The Boys. And now it just came out with the second season. It's on Amazon Prime. I think it's a great show. It has a great style, but also resonates with a lot of things that are happening in this world. And I think it's an interpretation for superheroes that is a lot more realistic and a lot more, it makes sense to me that superheroes will be arrogant douchebags and possibly corrupt, and then what you do, right? It's a great show. The first season was great. Just started the second season. Excited about it. So that's my
on
recommendation.
Netflix or
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. All right.
The Boys. All right. So I think...
How is it called in Hebrew? Do you know?
No.
Right. Never mind then.
All right. So
My recommendation is Again Enochi. אני רק אגיד. Again Enochi של ריצ'רד דוקינס.
All right. Great. Not a very optimistic discussion, but it's a highly important one.
Yeah.
And if we're all aware and if we all start just marginally push back, each one of us, then maybe, grains of sand make a heap eventually. So awareness is the first step. All right.
Oh.
That's it for now. Until next time. Thanks all.
Bye.
Thanks again to Dr. Robert Epstein. Bye-bye.
Time to play the game.
If you found this episode valuable, please consider subscribing to our podcast, rate it on the different apps, and sharing it with your friends and family, because if you found it valuable, it's probably worth it. Also, help us make this content better. Give us comments, give us feedback via email, follow us on Twitter, or on our feed. Whatever you do to resonate with this content just helps us be better and improve. So we really appreciate it and hope to have you back with us soon. Thank you.